It was the dawn of the third age of podcasting, 30 years after the series had launched.
The Babylon Podcast was a dream given form. Its goal, to discuss the place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully.
It's a port of call, home away from home for established fans, newbies, John, Blaine, and guests.
Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night.
It can be a dangerous place.
Wait, what?
But it's our last, best hope for peace.
This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations.
The year is 2024.
The name of the podcast is
Babylon 5, 30 years later.
Hello and thank you for downloading this latest episode of Babylon 5, 30 years later. This is a podcast where we ostensibly go through every episode of Babylon 5, the hit 1990s science fiction drama that is a classic to all of us, 30 years after they're released. But you'll notice that if you look at your TV guide, there was no episode of Babylon 5 released today, or the 30-year version of today, in 1995. And that is because we're on a broadcast break, but we're not on a podcast break. No. Blaine, we have feedback.
We do. In fact, we have enough feedback that we're probably going to be doing 2 feedback episodes this break. We'll do this one
This is not
now.
a complaint.
No.
This is not a complaint at all. It's just we thought we'd bite-size your listening chunks.
Yes. Yeah, we're just breaking it up into, what works for our schedules and the free version of StreamYard's recording time limits. And yeah, so we'll have, instead of 4 episodes this break, we'll have 5 because we do have some other bonus content we want to cover as well.
Now, I do want to say up front here that I have been watching, so around about the start of season 2, I sort of mainlined season 1 with Mindy, and we've been watching the show as our episodes have been coming out. So we started season 3, a month ago, and we watched Passing Through Gethsemane just a couple of nights ago as we're recording this. And I am very gratified at how into the world she is. It says something about the fact that this is a very character-driven show, a very story-driven show, and much less of a, plot-driven or hijinks-driven kind of thing. But yeah, she's really into it. She knows the world. She knows the people. She knows the dynamics. And it's been really fun to watch with her.
Yeah, this is a show I know people who don't watch sci-fi have found out. They don't watch sci-fi in general. They don't like it, but they're very into politics, have jumped on this show and have been really enjoying it.
Mm.
But yeah, as you said, there is a world that is very well thought out. And there's a couple of hiccups, like early on, they said Minbari had 2 casts instead of 3. But compared to other shows, it is much more consistent. Right? It's not like, say, Cheers and Frasier, where there's an episode of Frasier where Sam comes to visit, and about 6 of those 22 minutes are spent just reconciling what appears to be continuity errors by saying, yeah, Frasier lied about this and this and this. Like on Cheers, he says both of his parents were psychologists and are now dead, and he was an only child.
Because they didn't care at the time, and then they made a show about him.
Yep. But then they, at least they didn't just acknowledge it, they made it work for the show. Like, what? You told him I was a shrink? And you didn't even tell him I was a cop. Well, what did you care? You were dead. Like, yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and dive into this rather tall stack of envelopes. The first message we have is from my good friend and cousin, Ryan Wilson. He emails us about episodes 15 and 16 from season 2. He says, those were, by the way, And Now for a Word and In the Shadow of Z'ha'dum. To the Babylon 5 gentlemen. Blaine, I think that's us.
But I hope so. It's nice to be called gentlemen.
Yes, I try to be gentle. And now for a word. An episode about cable news stations with an agenda? Thank goodness this is no longer applicable in our enlightened age. Implacable wars between different groups? Thank goodness this is no longer applicable in our enlightened age. While I'm not sure this episode is supposed to be depressing, sure feels that way now, at least to me. We can praise JMS for writing something where life imitates art, imitates life, imitates art. Yes. Yes, that is true. It did resonate rather loudly whenever we watched it again a few months ago. He says, I did like Kosh ignoring the camera crew. However, I wonder what the interview would have been like. I suspect no one can dissemble like a Vorlon. Any thoughts on that, Blaine?
Yeah, I think they'd have a hard time getting any useful sound bites out of Kosh because his responses are so succinct. On the one hand, you need context for it. You can't have them in isolation. But on the other hand, they can invent almost any context they want to make it appear as though Kosh is saying anything they want because there's no context provided in his response.
True. He would be perfect for like a send-up where they take his responses and put whatever they want to behind him. Ryan goes on to say, the reporter picking a fight with Delenn still makes me angry. It's a well-acted scene, though, so my compliments to both actresses. Yeah, that's a hard scene. The Psycor commercial. For some reason, I trust them. It's a good thing they are everywhere. An interesting idea for an episode. It's the kind of episode you could do with a 22-episode season. I don't know that this kind of thing would be made now when seasons are only 8 episodes.
Yeah, well, you never know. I mean,
if you used it to advance the plot significantly, because this episode did move some things surprisingly. Like we got some good Babylon 5-ness in there along the way, but yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely there are ways to make it work, but I don't know. You'd think that with the shorter episodes, we would do fewer off formula goofiness, but there's a pretty prominent example of the opposite going on right now.
Going on to In the Shadow of Z'ha'dum, a minor episode of little importance. Moving on. I kid. Firstly, we have Veer as one of the first people on screen standing up to Morden. I love that. No one here is exactly as they appear. I remember being shocked seeing Morden as a crew member on the Icarus the first time the episode aired. We needed to learn about him eventually. Yeah. And I saw that when I watched that again, of course, I had the entire book 8 in my brain, which we haven't talked about on the show yet when this is coming out, but we have read and recorded about in our recording sessions.
Yeah. Well, I think you meant book 9, but yes.
Book 8 is about the Icarus trip. Book 7 is about the Icarus trip. Book 9 is about...
Oh, right. Yes. I remember it was 7 and 9 were the significant ones, but yes. An upcoming book.
Yes. So yeah, there's a lot more in my head when I saw him there. Zach Allen joins Nightwatch, an organization that spies and makes sure everyone thinks the right way. What could possibly go wrong? Nothing, Ryan. Nothing goes wrong. Zach Allen is our precious child. Franklin's taking stims to keep him going. I'm sure this is going to be fine as well. Yes, definitely. Obviously, the most important parts of the episode have to do with getting information about what's actually been going on since the show started. We find out what Delenn asked in the first season finale. She must have suspected something was amiss when Warden showed up in her quarters to ask what she wanted.
Yeah, she definitely reacted to the question itself.
I feel like I should go back some time and just pay attention to what Delenn says and does that we don't know about all the meaning to. Because I would say we learn about the first ones and the wars they fought against the Shadows. We learn that we are basically on our own this time, except for the Vorlons. We still don't know what the Shadows are really doing, but for now it's enough to know they need to be stopped. More answers will be coming later, we hope. They're bad guys. Stop the bad guys. They have spidery ships. They're scary.
Mm-hmm.
That's enough reason, right? Finally, we learned that Z'ha'dum is the homeworld of the Shadows. It explains why Morden didn't want the Narn to investigate earlier this season. And there's much more that I can write about this episode, but since you probably need to save your reading time for the spin-off novels and comic books, I'll just end it here until the next time. Ryan Wilson. Thank you, Ryan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely some good stuff. And actually, our next piece of feedback is also an email from Ryan Wilson covering season 2 episodes 17 and 18, specifically Knives and Confessions and Lamentations. And Ryan writes, Babylon 5 team, here we go again. Knives. A Marcab corpse. Interesting. Yeah, we'll never see one of those again.
Oh.
The Sheridan plotline with the alien that wants to go home is a bit strange, but normal science fiction stuff. Lots of Star Trek episodes are like this, so I won't complain too much. The episode shines as a Londo character study.
Is Knives the one where Sheridan is captured?
I think it's the one where he goes out to the rim and gets possessed more than captured.
Okay.
I think that was the subplot there. I'm pretty sure it was, because I think the main one is Londo and his old friend.
Gotcha.
So,
that's right. Yes.
Okay. So Rifa and Urza are the two sides of Londo's personality, the one that wants power and the one that is a good man. It makes sense that Rifa and Urza are in conflict since Londo is as well. And since Londo keeps going down his dark path, the Rifa side keeps winning and essentially kills off his Urza side in this episode.
That's a nice metaphorical way to look at it. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. I hadn't seen it that way, but that's exactly what's happening. So Londo refuses to change and stop his downward spiral. I think it's here where I basically gave up on him and started to think of him as an antagonist. I don't buy that he didn't suspect that the Centauri Prime Minister was assassinated. I don't believe somebody politically savvy would just assume it was a suicide. I think that Londo didn't want to look into the matter, but I guess it's good he has to face it now. I would agree with that, especially given we already heard that was the classic Centauri way, was to assassinate your superiors to move forward. So, again, I don't want to draw too many Star Trek parallels, especially given an upcoming piece of feedback, but it's like Klingon promotions, except not face-to-face. At least the Klingons will face you head-on when they're trying to kill you and get promoted.
Or the Terrans.
Yeah. So back to Ryan's email. Now Londo's conscience becomes Veer. It will be interesting to see how/if this develops further. As always, Jurasic gives a great performance. So do Carmen Arganziano as Ursa Jado and William Ford as Rifa. A great last script by DiTillio. Yeah, Larry DiTillio didn't know he was going to be done with that script, but it is a nice beat to end on.
Yeah, solid episode.
So Ryan's thoughts on Confessions and Lamentations. It's always nice to go on break with a lighthearted romp, but instead we get a plague. Let's start with Kefir first. How often do you hear that? It's too bad he was forced into the show. I wonder how his character would have been accepted if he had grown naturally. In any case, Sheridan forbidding him to look for the shadow ship is not actually going to stop him. Now it's forbidden fruit. Yeah, I have thoughts on Kefir that I have shared on a podcast we haven't heard yet, because we have to see how season 3 ends and season 4 begins before those comments will make sense. They have been recorded, and you'll hear them when they're no longer spoilers.
But it is interesting to think that he probably now would have taken every chance he could to sneak some looking around into things.
Yeah. Secondly, Sheridan and his dinner with Delenn and Lanier is amusing. Yeah, it was with the crunchy tofu. Which and I think I mentioned it in the recording, but that crunchy part of the tofu, that was not scripted. That was not the director. That was not the actor. That was the sound people going, it would make this funnier. So it was entirely post-production, and they ran with it, and James is going, that is awesome. Leave it in. Third, Franklin using stims again. Okay, now into the plague stuff. This feels a bit different after COVID. People not believing in the disease? Well, JMS nailed that one. Watching the little girl stumble is horrifying. I liked that Franklin gives his speech about not giving up after the Pakmara died of the plague. His point that we have more information than we did before worked on me anyway. He can be arrogant, but he's the kind of doctor you want working on something like this, or anything for that matter. Alas, the cure is found too late, and basically the Marcab are gone after this episode. I suppose the work can help with similar viruses if possible, but it's still a cruel way to end things. Sigh, well, I'm sure the next one will be bright and cheerful. Until the next email, good eating to you. Yeah, that was a gut punch. Hopefully the cure can help with others. I mean, if you look at what's happened this year, there's a team at McMaster University in Canada who have developed an mRNA treatment, which in the early trials, after 4 exposures, it given over about 6 months, it seems to cure type 1 diabetes. And another team has very promising results with small mammals about a universal cancer vaccine. They found a couple of proteins that are common to all sorts of cancers, and they've developed an mRNA vaccine that targets that specifically. They're having issues trying to study it with a variety of cancers because they find once they've treated mice with it, they can't give them another type of cancer because it's fighting it off too effectively. So
the one of the major vaccines that was produced for COVID back in 2020 was actually just a flu vaccine that already existed with a slight modification. And so the idea that you could use research for one disease and apply it to another disease is definitely something that has happened.
Yeah, a lot of the reason that the COVID vaccine felt rushed is it was a quick turnaround time, but they were able to do that because they started developing the mRNA technology after H1N1. So all they had to do was plug in the identifier that makes it uniquely attack COVID. That was the only piece left. They had the rest ready to go sitting on the shelf. They just needed the target.
Mm-hmm.
And then the statistics got sped up because normally they do 3 rounds of statistics with a small group, a medium-sized group, and then a large group. And because of the urgency, they were allowed to do all 3 groups simultaneously. So they had the same amount of statistics. They just did the groups simultaneously instead of sequentially. There
was so much misinformation and fear-mongering around all that. It really was just medicine people have already been taking for years. But anyways.
Yes.
So going on to Douglas Adamson, who emails us about confessions and lamentations and generals. Not sure which general. General Martok, maybe? I don't know. Hello, Blaine and John. Hello, Douglas. First of all, once again, apologies for the lateness of my feedback. No apology required, Douglas. Cousin Ryan just sent emails about 4 episodes, so it is not a thing. We will actually read new listeners' email on this. So if you have been watching or listening for the first time and have not been writing in because the episodes are old and you don't want to be a bother or whatever, remove the worries. Send us your thoughts on The Gathering and everything else. And if we're still making episodes, we will record them and we will read your feedback.
Even if we're done making episodes of this show, we have plans for 2 podcasts at least after this. When B5 is wrapped, we'll do a Twin Peaks podcast. We are already doing a Star Trek reading hour in parallel. So if we get enough feedback for a feedback episode after the podcast is wrapped, we'll probably just record that feedback and drop it out there anyway.
Mm-hmm. And just to clarify, that's already as we're already recording it. We have not started releasing the Star Trek episodes yet, but those are coming in next fall.
Yes. The completely not random release date is September 8th, 2026.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so Douglas says, the issue for me is I listen to you both on a Sunday morning, normally while I'm busy sorting out the school lunches for my kids for the next few days. By the time I finish listening or finish the lunches, I'm normally on to the next task. I never get around to getting back to the PC until much later in the day, by which time I can't remember what I wanted to say. Well, obviously the solution there, Douglas, is to let somebody else feed your kids because you want to write the emails, and that's the important part.
Yeah, and if they're old enough, packing their own lunches is a useful thing. So,
and while I can't remember the fine points of the last number of episodes we've covered, I do want to thank you both for a great show, which has helped me maintain my love of Babylon 5. Aw. I can't believe it's almost 18 months since you started, and we are almost finished with season 2. Of course, the erratic scheduling of P10 back in the day doesn't help. Ironically, I didn't experience the gap of time between episodes that the US did, as I did in the UK, and Channel 4 just kept going. In fact, I seem to recall that we got the end of seasons 1, 2, and 3 well before those episodes aired in North America. I have noticed the dual broadcast dates on the Wikipedia page. We've just been following the US/Canada releases.
Yeah, the UK had much shorter breaks. So where North America was getting season finales in October, the UK was getting them in late July or early August.
So Douglas says, I don't know if I mentioned before how big a part of my life Babylon 5 was and is. The show covered much of my university years. So I have flashbacks not only to the show, but also what I was doing around that time. I think you could sum up everything I was doing during the time as either Babylon 5, NFL Europe's Scottish Claymores, or online communities on Talkers. I've made lifelong friends via B5, so it's been fun to think back to episodes and go, oh, yes, that was the one where one of my friends did this, etc. Oh, that's fun. Those are cool kinds of memories to revive.
Yes.
My memory doesn't work that well. Was Talkers a service back in the mid-90s that you knew about?
No, but if it's an ISP where you're dialing in, like an online service in the dial-up days.
Might be a local thing.
Yeah, it could have been a UK thing.
Yeah.
Much like, I mean, we all heard about AOL here, but I don't know any Canadian who actually used it. Because, maybe if we had a COL, but no, not AOL.
That was actually where I met several early girlfriends, including the one that would eventually become my first wife, was on AOL. But anyways, maybe that's not a very good vote in its favor. But enough about my personal nostalgia, Douglas says.
I don't know. So, hey, without AOL, you wouldn't have been a father, and that was worth it.
Sure. I wanted to also thank you for covering the books and the comics in the long gaps between air dates, plus 30 years. While I did read all the novels as they came out and probably still have a few of them, I don't always remember much about them. The comics I have a better memory of. I seem to recall a story that the U.S. military figured out that the medium of comics was the most effective way to get information across, better than text, film, illustrations, etc. So perhaps that's only right. I remember the comics better than the novels. Either that or the first few novels didn't advance the B5 plot much and could be almost ignored easily. Probably a lot of column B there.
Yeah, I was going to say both things could very well be true. That's one of the reasons when Stan Lee was doing his service in World War II, his service was sitting down and writing how-to guides and instruction manuals. They had him behind a desk writing training content, and they would have that illustrated. Partly because, speaking as a teacher, when you have illustrations, it does a lot to support your weaker readers. So
I'm rereading the novels as we're going through them, but I'm doing it on a slightly different schedule because the first time through I read the novels leading up to our recording date where we talked about them. This was not always in the same time when they were released. For example, we're going to be talking about book 3 in a soon episode, but book 3 actually came out at the beginning of the last string of episodes. So I read it back in October. And so I was done with it before G'Kar had his fall from grace. So it was, it was rather poignant in ways that we're going to go into in the novel because the plot of the novel is very G'Kar focused. It was a different experience this time around than it was the first time where I'd already seen a lot of that G'Kar, this segment of the G'Kar plotline before I even started reading the book. But Douglas goes on to say, this does bring me to the UK Titan Babylon 5 magazine. I seem to recall it had comic strips in there, but I can't remember if they were reprints of the DC comics or new material. I will try and investigate to let you know. I am very curious, Douglas, so please do let us know. If there's new story material in there, I'm going to pop my cork.
Yep.
I'll try and be more up to date, which is ironic considering you record the episodes years in advance. With my feedback, once you start back into the last few episodes of season 2, I look forward to hearing John's reactions. I also look forward to hearing John's reactions. Thank you again for a great show, and while I might be quiet, I certainly am a loyal listener. Doug Adamson, Edinburgh, Scotland.
All right. Thank you, Doug, and I hope you don't take our suggestions about your parenting too seriously. I've been sitting here regretting suggesting to people how to parent differently because, I don't know your family.
My suggestion was going to be if there's enough of an age gap between the older ones and the youngest one, that the youngest one could just become the lunches. So I didn't make that suggestion. So,
okay. Anyway, speaking of your family, I do want to say I loved your father's work, right? Because, etymology of names, Douglas Adamson would be the son of Douglas Adams, right?
Well, yes, obviously.
Yes.
Probably the 42nd of that name.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. Our next piece of feedback is about our previous episode on feedback. Mahatma Randy 5977 says, "God, I hate that Mahatma Randy guy. He talks too much and monopolizes all your time."
Yeah, kick him to the side.
Yeah. Bagged on or bagging on is something is Gen X slang for continually insulting something. And in one of the Universe Today newspapers we see people reading now and again, one of them has the headline, "Did Psi Corps violate charter by endorsing Santiago?" Or something to that.
Oh.
Yeah, that is a thing that happens sometimes. Entities that are not supposed to make political endorsements do.
And yet also entities that feel like their voices shouldn't be political, and so they don't make political announcements will often get slandered as being very much different than what they are. I think about a particular very popular musician who does not use her platform to voice politics, but has been heard behind closed doors to be very, very strongly opposed to the current administration. And yet she is often described as being pro the current administration because people don't know what she stands for. It's just interesting.
Yeah, there's the attitude, if you're not publicly and adamantly for us, then you're against us.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's where I am. We had a teacher strike a couple months back, and people were criticizing our teachers union, saying, hey, they support this particular left-wing party because here's leaked emails saying, hey, join this party and make the donations. And members of the union responded, and here's the emails for every time there's a leadership vote in every other party saying exactly the same thing. It is not a partisan party. It's saying, get involved with every political party so you could see the internal conversations and advocate for the candidates who support education. So, like, be involved with every party is what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that was horribly misconstrued because the party with the most recent leadership race is on the other side of the political spectrum from our current leadership, such as it is.
Yeah. So that takes us to Mahatma Randy again, commenting on YouTube about comics 5 through 8, which I don't know if I said this back then. That is my favorite run of the entire first comic series. We have not finished our coverage of the comic series in our episodes yet, but 5 through 8, the entire series was worth it for that arc.
Yeah.
For me.
And for people confused about that, yes, we have released our coverage of issues 9 to 11 to wrap up that series, but there's another Babylon 5 miniseries. It's coming down the pipe.
Did we put out our 9 through 11 episode?
Yep.
I don't remember. Okay. I remember reading them. I don't remember listening, but that's okay. My memory is Swiss cheese.
Yum.
Okay. So Randy says, likeness rights has always been my guess as to why Garibaldi looks so unlike himself. I mean, his head is kind of shaped like a balding potato in both the comics and in real life, so it's fine.
It almost would have been funny if they just drawn the character like Bruce Willis, because Jerry Doyle described himself as like a Bruce Willis type. So when you can't afford Bruce Willis, you get him.
That's funny.
I think that might have been amusing. And apparently one of his first acting goals is where one of his first acting roles. I haven't watched the episode yet, but apparently there's an episode of Moonlighting where he's like, like a stunt double for Bruce Willis's character type. So
this is going to become one of those things where they keep posting pictures of Nicolas Cage and calling them John Travolta. No, I don't remember the actor's name, so never mind, I can make that joke. But anyways, I don't think the aliens we see in this issue were ever intended to be shadows. I always took them to be soldiers of darkness, like the one Amos, the lurker, encountered in the Earth/Minbari War, and which stalked the station in the Long Dark. Season 2, Episode 5. I think we agree with that these were people working for the shadows, not the shadows themselves.
Yeah.
The pink creatures.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially on the reread, it became very clear that the shadows were in the ships, but every actual person that we saw was not a member of that species.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I don't think this constitutes a spoiler. In the comic, Garibaldi and Sinclair are roaming around on Mars at some point 5 or 10 years prior to the show, specifically wandering around the Syria Planum. During the A Voice in the Wilderness 2-parter from season 1, when the Martian riots are going on and no one can get through the communications blackout, Garibaldi asks Talia to please try to get a message through using the Psi Corps base at Syria Planum And Talia says, you're not even supposed to know that exists. Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
That's a subtle connection.
It is. It's there in a conversation with Talia, and I want to say it comes up in a conversation with Bester at some point, too. I'm not as confident on that, but yes, it's definitely there.
Okay, so me and my memory and piecing stuff together. Later in Babylon 5, when they're talking about things that Earth has gone through or things that humanity has gone through, they mention the Mars riots.
Yes, there were two sets of riots. So the ones that Randy is specifying here were happening during that episode, and Garibaldi was trying to get a hold of Lee's, and we even commented that it would have been better to have the episode after Voice in the Wilderness air before, as intended.
Right, because
yeah, to better establish her.
But the Mars riots themselves.
Yeah, there were also Mars food riots that took place prior to the show.
Okay, because in my head, the Mars riots were a past tense thing the whole time. I forgot there were more riots here. But also, Mars is a very unstable political place, so it makes sense to be more rioting.
Yes.
Randy says at the time it just seemed like a typical Garibaldi knows a bunch of stuff he's not supposed to thing, but now we know how he found out it existed. He was there in these issues. Thank you for drawing that connection, Randy, because I had missed it. Or if I caught it in those episodes, I forgot that I caught it. Or not that I would have caught it, but Blaine might have mentioned it.
Yeah, I certainly intended to. Now I'm questioning if I did.
There is an allusion to the events of these issues in the first episode in season 3, which seems of no significance at the time, and an overt reference in the middle of season 3, which I was super happy about because not only did it reward me for reading the tie-in media, but it also made me believe the tie-in stuff actually counted, which I'd begun to doubt by that point based on the quality of the novels. I feel JMS had vastly greater success in making the comics canon than the novels. Agreed. And yeah, I think the tie-ins in season 3 are why this arc was my favorite of the run. But also it's just really cool world building in a way that not even the first arc, which was the first arc would have been a 5 episode. But I think the second arc did a much better job of giving us world building to chew on.
Yeah, the first arc was entertaining and definitely took off the show and added to the show, but not in ways that fed back into the show. So if you read the comics, you're like, oh yes, this is expanding the world, but I don't remember any point where you're watching the show and think, oh, they're referencing the comics for the first 4 issues or the last 3 issues. These ones, as we're saying right here, right now, yeah, that actually happened. And yeah, I agree. That really solidifies it.
We will see reference, though, to that first arc in ways that I guess maybe I just won't say why because it's still a ways down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But that's me giving form to the dream right there. Hey.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because you can do that now.
I can do that now. I've got dream form in a bucket.
Yes, because just pulling the curtain back a bit at the time of this recording, the next episode we're going to record about is the season 4 finale.
Yes, 422 is coming up in a week or 2 weeks or some number of weeks very soon.
Yeah. Now, our next piece of feedback is from Ryan Wilson, covering
I know that guy.
Our previous feedback episode and comics 5 to 8. So Ryan says, my question about feedback episode 6. If I give feedback to the feedback episode and then you read this feedback on the next feedback episode, who gets a headache first?
Londo.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Or Ivanova or Jakar, because they're all prone to headaches.
Yeah, I'm picturing Peter David's episode where, Jakar deliberately wore boots to drive people nuts. And it didn't drive Londo nuts. Which Peter David included just for the sake of the makeup people, so didn't have to design Jakar's feet, but it still worked really well on screen.
Yes, it did.
Anyway, back to Ryan's feedback on comics 5 to 8. I had not read this story either. It's interesting that we have Garibaldi assuming something is up with Londo. I don't think that's something we get in the TV show, although they obviously have a falling out. We get a decent story with Kefir. That's fun. And we get the first meeting between Sinclair and Garibaldi. Yeah, all that is true. We lacked decent stories with Kefir on screen. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things, another reason I really like those issues as well. Those are 5 to 8 so far are my favorites. They're certainly the favorite of that first 11. We'll see if the miniseries eclipses them or not. I
To be
always
fair, Kefir was little more than a sounding board in that episode, but as a minor supporting character who was forced onto the show, that's definitely giving him something to do.
yeah, it's a lot more to do than identify that teddy bear drifting out by the station.
Very important teddy bear.
Yes. Anyway, Ryan continues. It's interesting that some of these events do get mentioned in the show at some point. For example, unless I am misremembering, didn't Garibaldi mention the hike from issue 6 to an ISN reporter? I think it's in Infection from season 1. Yeah, I'm not confident which episode it is, but he absolutely does mention taking that.
Which I caught on the rewatch with our releases. When I heard him mention that, I texted Blaine and was like, "Hey, we saw the comics about that."
Mm-hmm. Ryan continues, I like again that the writers, artists, etc. are taking advantage of the medium of comics to show things that might be too expensive, like Mars, or too difficult to work out, Michael O'Hara's Jeffrey Sinclair. Anyway, not much to say about the issues, so on to the second novel and 3 more comic books until next time. Yes, I agree with that, and we have another piece of tie-in media coming that really surprised me with how it used Jeffrey Sinclair. That not too much more about that because I don't think that even John has read it yet. So,
all right, that takes us to Mahatma Randy again. What? Writing in on the YouTube comments about novel number 2, Accusations, which of the 2 we've covered so far is I think both of our preferred novel. Although number 3 is not a bad book. I really enjoyed number 3. We haven't talked about it yet.
Yeah, I think novel 1 has one moment at the end that throws me out, but overall it's enjoyable.
It was decent.
But of the 9, there's only one where someone said, "Hey, should I read this?" I would say no.
Which we've said probably about 75 times.
Yeah.
He says, "Wow, I don't remember this at all. I have a vague recollection of a conspiracy to cover up raider attacks and cargo theft, but I honestly don't remember any of this. I suppose that's a good thing, since my memories of the previous book are entirely negative. Ergo, this one obviously must be at least serviceable. You guys can ignore this comment when you get to the viewer mail. Special, it's not worth noting. I made 2 other comments, but realized both of them were spoilers, so I deleted them. I really appreciate the explanation of the transuranic elements and the strong nuclear force." That's the physicist on the show.
Yeah. But I'm glad someone appreciates it because, sometimes when I go on tangents like that, I worry about it. And clearly we felt that, the comment was worth sharing. So,
yes.
Yeah. Okay, so back to an email from Ryan Wilson, also about novel 2, There All the Honor Lies. Ryan says, "Hello, podcast people. I had read some of the Babylon 5 novels, and I think I read this one, but I don't remember it at all. My recollections are, while this is not my favorite story, it's relatively true to the characters. The exception, I think, is Garibaldi still being as obsessed with Talia. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that mostly a season 1 issue? I might be a bit off on this. He was way more explicit with it in season 1. Later in season 2 with Gropos, he basically does say he still has a thing for her and he's holding off, but he's approaching it. Yeah, he's got a healthier approach to it, slightly. But yeah,
I think it's hard to just stop being attracted to somebody, especially when it's unrequited or there's nothing specifically bad that happens between the 2 of you. But he's just not pursuing that.
Yeah, he said he's got a much healthier way to cope with it. So, Ryan continues, I have always read/watched spin-off media with the idea that we could fit these stories in between episodes. But if there's anything that contradicts canon, the television show wins. Maybe the characters just forgot something. I don't know how we can square away Bester's first meeting with Sheridan in episode 8 and this meeting here, but a special Babylon 5 no prize to anyone who can. The only thing I could think of is that Bester decided he didn't get off on the right foot with that beating and intrusively wiped Sheridan's memory so that when we get to that episode, Sheridan doesn't remember that they have met before.
That would be a serviceable no prize. It would be a very poor writing choice, in my opinion. But as a making it dance between the raindrops, that works.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, I think it's functional, but it's probably not as preferable as just saying, yeah, they screwed up. But anyway, Ryan continues, it's good to have Harriman Gray show up. I don't think he shows up in the show again. He doesn't, but Jeffrey Combs is always welcome.
Yes. In fact, my other show that I'm currently working on, Ninjas and Bots, he is voicing one of the Transformers on Transformers Prime, and Lane and I are watching that. When we did the novel coverage for Accusations, I had almost no memory of who Harriman Gray was. And so going back and rewatching season 1, when we got to the episode where he appears, it's like, oh, that's Harriman Gray. And I was able to back associate him with novel 2 and then remember him much better whenever I reread novel 2. I really like him. And yeah, Jeffrey Combs is always welcome.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the episode, There All the Honor Lies, Ryan says, Babylon 5 theme merchandise? Whoever heard of such a thing? I assume this was an attempt at comedy. It didn't really work for me, but hopefully others enjoyed it. It was an attempt at comedy and taking a stab at it, because the issue was that there was, when Deep Space Nine was coming out, that writer cared a lot about Star Trek and heard them comment about how it was continuing the Star Trek franchise, and it rubbed him the wrong way that it had turned it into a franchise instead of just a single creative effort. He's not big on the whole massive franchise thing. So he didn't like that shift in attitude and was taking a dig at them.
The idea of action figures and merchandise and everything, I imagine there probably weren't actual Babylon 5 action figures on the shelves at the time, and that these were made for the show. Is that wrong?
I don't know when they were made, but they definitely made them. So I'm not sure at which point in the series that merchandise came out, but there were official Babylon 5 action figures out there.
Because pulling those off the shelves and using them as your merchandise in the show would be a really funny move. If that's what they did, I like that. But I imagine they were just making props for the episode.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if the actual merchandise came later. I don't know the timeline on that one, but I do know that they exist. I've seen in the Babylon 5 fan groups that I don't recommend people join until they've seen the whole show, but boy, are there spoilers there.
Yeah.
A lot of people are sharing pictures of, hey, I finally got this one signed and I got that one signed, and they've got, the completed box action figures. So Ryan continues, what I do enjoy is the view on Minbari politics and the mystery. It's interesting that some Minbari are still upset with Sheridan. Not everyone is over the war. Veer being replaced because his position is no longer seen as a joke feels like something that would happen. Veer is easy to dismiss by people who don't know him, but we viewers at Londo know better.
Well, I just keep remembering back to the first time we saw him, and he was playing Game Boy during a peace negotiation. At the beginning of the show, Veer was useless, and he has stepped up as needs required, and he has filled the shoes he needs to fill. The idea that other people might not realize that, and their opinion of Veer is something, more 2 years ago, and so they want to replace him, seems reasonable. But I'm glad that he was able to stay.
Yes. Yep. He was a character that had to rise to the occasion, and it looks like they never put him in a position where he really had anything significant to rise to until now. And yes, as we said, like standing up to Morden was a fantastic moment for him.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan continues, I like the callback from Londo about when Minbari might lie. It's a reminder of a time when Londo was more fun to be around. Yes, cheating in that
Not
card game.
Londo, yeah.
A pretty good episode with everything considered, but not one of my favorites. Until the next email. Yeah, I would agree. It's an enjoyable episode, but there are much bigger standouts.
Our episode wrapping up our comics coverage with issues 9 through 11 from Randy. And before I get into his topics, rereading 9 and 10, I did not dislike them as much as I remember disliking them on the episode. It was a much more tolerable read. Just the fact that it didn't contribute anything to the lore was surprising. But that's just my own comments. Let's get on to Randy's comments. I read the entire one of these comics when they first came out. I remember I was living in Atlanta when the last batch dropped. The two-parter with Jakar and Garibaldi was amusing enough at the time, but a few months later, I remembered that I had no memory of it. So I read them again, and then a few months after that, I realized I still had no memory of them, apart from the central access tube stuff. I did genuinely like the idea that they were not in a ship. They were stashed in the almost never visited section of the station where no one would think to look. But beyond that, I really didn't remember any of the details. It's pretty frivolous, and based on your review here, it's actively bad. I didn't remember it being actively bad, but on some subconscious level, I just kept filing it out of my memory. I guess there's a reason for that. It's not actively good.
Yeah.
Do you guys know anything about the never published Bill Mumy story? Blaine?
Only that it exists. As we said, the cancellation was rather abrupt. And Mumy had already written for Marvel Comics. He did a miniseries for, I think it's Comet Man, who, I haven't read the original miniseries, but I did read it when he returned to the character for Marvel Comics Presents, which the way those chunks were formatted, I'm wondering if maybe the series got an early cancellation, but they'd already commissioned it, so they just put the pages there. But yeah, he had comic writing experience. He wanted to do it again, so I know that the story exists, but that's as far as I know.
Okay. I remember in some online chat or something, JM said that the last 3 issues were less canonical than the rest of them. Elsewhere, I remember him saying that 9 and 10 didn't count at all. That's probably after the run ended and he wasn't concerned about affecting their sales. I think 11 is still considered canonical. When they do the collections, they do 1 through 8 and 11.
Yeah, 11, because the whole thing is the Psychor propaganda piece, if it doesn't fit with continuity, they just say, yeah, that was propaganda. They lied. Mm-hmm. So it can kind of sort of count. So it counts, but you can't trust a word of it.
And it gives Bester's backstory. Randy says, I remember someone asking him about telepaths on the Battle of the Line, and Joe said it's a propaganda piece put out by the Psychor. Why would you take any of it at face value? Hey, that's what Blake just said. And we're told that only 200 humans survived the Battle of the Line. Assuming any Teeps were there, I doubt it. How likely is it that any of them survived to tell the tale? Particularly because Sinclair's decision was done in a moment of rage, and his squadron was already breaking formation, judging from what we've heard about it in Sinclair's flashbacks. I don't remember the Battle of the Line connections that he's connecting to.
Basically, the Psychor propaganda piece gave the telepaths involved credit for winning the Battle of the Line.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that was a point made in issue 11. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
He says there's indications that in universe this was published for distribution on B5 very early in the station's history, since they only mention Sinclair and 1 or 2 other really minor details that I have since forgotten. I remember I explained the presence of woman who is neither Lita nor Talia at the time by figuring maybe she was a temporary assignment for a few weeks during the final stages of the construction or before the station went fully online, because the station was clearly in operation prior to it going fully online, whatever that means. There were a lot of people already on the station prior to the gathering. Yeah, because at the end of the gathering, Takashima says we're open for business or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was already a very busy station by that point.
Yeah, it could be that. She could have been a temporary fill-in between Lita and Talia, because we don't know how soon after the gathering Lita left and how early Talia came in.
So we do know that Lita was there when Franklin came on because they knew each other.
Yeah. So, except we saw Franklin come on a couple weeks later. But
was Franklin's first episode his entry to the station?
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Okay, well, Lita says something in one of her episodes about Franklin before she left. They make a mention of her and Franklin having some sort of interaction. I forget the details now, but it stuck in my brain whenever I watched that episode last week.
Okay. Because, yeah, we see Franklin when he's assigned to the station.
Huh. Okay, maybe I misinterpreted, or maybe there's a writing drop. I don't know.
Okay.
Either way, it could be between the two, or it could be before Talia. We just don't, or before Lita, rather. We just don't know.
Yeah, or because the whole thing is a propaganda piece, they might have just said, well, let's hire this professional actress to do this part. Mm-hmm. Often they do that to make them look more attractive. But when you're comparing to Pat Tallman and Andrea Thompson, I don't know why that would be necessary.
There's, I remember thinking the mention of Bester, which, no spoilers, contradicts aspects of his life that we'll hear about later on, implied that Bester was seen as sort of a hero to the general population back home. A kind of psychop, officer-friendly, or whatever. But yeah, the woman who is neither Lita nor Talia was probably never on the station and may not even have been a telepath. She might have just been an actress playing a role for some propaganda. Yeah, they just got Sharon. They got Sharon to do it.
Yep.
Say the lines.
Oh, come on. This is Psychor. You know they're not going to hire a Sharon. They're going to hire a Karen.
I don't remember the details, and this is me, not Randy. I don't remember the details of Besser's backstory as given in the show well enough to know where they would have contradicted the comic. But again, not surprising that might happen occasionally since it was just a big old propaganda piece.
The piece he's referring to is a piece we haven't covered yet.
Arrow. Okay. Randy says, I don't think this is a spoiler, but feel free to delete my comment if it is. The sleepers have a wide spectrum of side effects on people who take them, much like any other medication. If you take aspirin, the side effects can range from non-existent all the way up to having seizures. In extreme cases, people can even vomit up blood in something that looks like coffee grounds. I don't want to know what the coffee ground stuff is. Or it can simply not work on you at all. I myself appear to be pretty much immune to aspirin. So the sleepers seem to range from having no discernible effects whatsoever to the extremely bad and debilitating effects that Ivanova's mom had, which is probably every bit as uncommon as having seizures from taking aspirin. Presumably this propaganda booklet mentions the tiredness thing because tiredness is the most common side effect. That's an interesting take, Randy. I think it's a very believable take, but do we have indications from the show that different people react to sleepers in different ways?
Well, no, but we also don't really have anything that contradicts it because Ivanova's mom is the only one who's been on sleepers where we've been able to discuss the effects.
Okay.
So we have one data point. We can't build a bell curve.
Very good. That does help to explain why the sleepers might not have just a generally negative public perception. Because I feel like if every single person that took them reacted like Ivanova's mom, that would be a widespread negative perception of them.
Yeah, I think between that and the propaganda really encouraging to make the other choice where they join Psi Corps, that's probably a big piece of it too. Because it's, hey, now you have a job that almost no one else can do.
Right. Good points, Randy.
Mm-hmm. All right, now back to an email from Ryan Wilson covering the second novel and comics 9 to 11. So he writes, Babylon 5 types. I might have read this novel many years ago since some of it sounds familiar, but it's not one I remember all that well. Most of the plot you discussed I did not remember. I'm glad you liked it more than the first novel. So are we, Ryan. So are we. I wonder if the author had seen more episodes of the show and so had a better grasp of the show and characters when she started writing the novel. That's entirely possible.
It's really hard to tell from the books where they were when they started writing them. Because those first few books could have been written any time during season 2 with a bare notes understanding of the show beyond season 1.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of them where the books published early in that transition have very little use of Sheridan because maybe they weren't entirely sure who he was, so they just kind of avoid rather than contradict. That does get much better with time in general. There are exceptions. As usual with tie-in media, I take the attitude that if you enjoyed it, then you can make it fit. But if you don't, then don't worry about it. Yeah, I like the attitude where everything is canon, unless it's irreconcilably contradicted by a story I like more. I know there are a couple of novels coming up that I liked. I think the fourth one, for example, so I'm eager to see if they hold up. Yeah, I would agree with that. I remember generally enjoying the fourth, but so far my favorites are 7 and 9. Of those first 9. Those two were really good. So Ryan continues, now to the comic books. Issues 9 and 10, we see some gadgets I don't think we ever see in the show, for example, the Star Web. The singing between G'Kar and Garibaldi is actually a recurring theme, pun intended. Interesting that Narns start negotiating as children. You know what? Human children do too, just not formally. Right? I tell my daughter, oh, okay, it's time to brush your teeth, and oh, how about you set a 2-minute timer so I can keep playing? Right? She does work well with timers generally.
Yes, a lot of kids just like a couple more minutes. So they know they have a few more minutes. I would, whenever we were at the playscapes at the mall or something where the kids could run around on a soft playground, whenever there were 5 minutes left or whatever, I would say, "Hey Lily, 5 minutes," and I would just hold up fingers as the minutes counted down. So if she wanted to check, she'd know how much time she had left.
Okay. That works. Pippa just likes to check the clock on my phone. So.
Well, she has to come up and do that to do that. Lily could just keep running and playing and cast a glance over her shoulder. At least that was my thought. Maybe she never did.
Yeah. Maybe not. And Pippa likes to, at that point, I also have to follow her, because if she knows there's like 10 seconds left, then she might try to play in the part of the play area that is furthest from me to buy a few extra seconds, because kids are smart and they will think of things like this. Anyway, Ryan continues, I never really worry about whether the art looks like the actors. As long as we can identify who is who, it's fine. But I can see why that's not something everyone agrees with. Comedy is tough with something that is inherently not comedic. I found a few times that Babylon 5 trying comedy didn't work. It feels like these issues were a similar miss. Yeah, I'd agree. They were going for it, and a lot of it is like, so much of the comedy was based on world building done in the comics that didn't necessarily show up again in the series. Just feels off.
And, David Gerald is funny. It just, this particular story didn't land for him. I still respect the hell out of the guy as a person and as a writer.
Yep, as do I. I think we even commented that, as far as we could tell, this was the weakest thing he'd ever written. And at this point in the run, I also don't know how close to his original wording it still was, given that DC was tinkering when they were supposed to be. Anyway, issue 11. It's interesting to get unreliable narrator stories, and who's more unreliable than Psycor? An interesting idea. Thanks for letting us know about the end of the comics run. It's a shame how it ended, but there's always something odd behind the scenes. Anyway, back next time for actual episodes.
It's pretty cool that we have so much knowledge of what goes on behind the scenes. I think that's probably largely because this is one creator's baby, and he was very heavily involved through all aspects of it. With the show, not to draw, the constant comparison, but with a show like Star Trek, where so many different people are involved in its creation, we often have to take multiple different voices about what happens behind the scenes and try to reconcile to find the truth in it all. And largely that truth, quote unquote, is choosing whom to believe about a particular thing. So with the thing like Babylon 5, we can feel reliable in our information that we have. It's pretty great.
Also, since they got the green light for The Gathering, JMS has been online talking production because he wanted Babylon 5 to be a way for people who want to work in the TV industry to learn how it works. So not only is it just the one voice, it's one voice who made a conscious choice to share an unusual amount of information compared to really every other show on the air.
Mm-hmm. So breaking back into episode coverage, we have an email from Stephen Asbell about episode 219. He says, hello, Blaine and John. I'm very much enjoying your podcast. Thank you, Stephen. I watched Babylon 5 during its original broadcast run back in the 1990s and have rewatched it several times since. I enjoy the insight and background information about the production you provide. Thank you, sir. My main point here is about your intro to the podcast episodes. The intro you have been using tracks nicely to the opening theme that was in season 1 of Babylon 5. However, as you both know, in season 2, the opening theme changed. It would have seemed appropriate, therefore, for you to have created a new theme for season 2. Since you're quite busy, I'm taking the time to write one for you. And he gives us some suggested scripts for new openings. Should I read these, or do you want to talk about these off air? I don't know. We talked about changing it.
Yeah, we did. We ultimately decided not to because I didn't know how to keep that going given the nature of the B5 intro for seasons 4 and 5.
Right.
I would have been really tempted to use these for season 2 had I read this email before I finished editing the entire run of season 2 episodes. So thank you very much for it. I like it. I think we should read it here. And thanks, Stephen.
So here's suggested, the Babylon 5 was our last best hope for peace. A self-contained world 5 miles long located in neutral territory. A place of commerce and diplomacy for 250,000 humans and aliens. A shining beacon in space, all alone in the night. It was the dawn of the third age of podcasting, the year the Great War came upon us all. This is a discussion of the last of the Babylon stations. The year is 2025. The name of the podcast is Babylon 5, 30 years later. I really, 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 really hope that he does not bring a great war upon us all.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah. Hopefully he just sticks to the trade war and the tariff war and doesn't which is now he's floating the idea that his tariffs are working so well he could drop income tax.
Well, didn't you know that he has now invoked favored nation status, and that we are losing hundreds of percents of drug costs? But anyways, this is not that show. This is the Babylon 5 podcast. But yes, he says it's not a spoiler of any significance to note that the show's opening theme was changed every season. So if you like this one, I can write you ones for the subsequent seasons as well.
Yeah, so I do like it. Obviously, we have already released 4 episodes of season 3.
Yeah. I'm welcome to hear your thoughts on what the theme could be. But we're unlikely to change it because we haven't changed it by this point. And like Blaine said, I've seen season 4, and I know that intro becomes very cataclysmic. I haven't yet heard season 5's intro.
It's not far away, but I think it's easier to do a version of season 4 than it is to do a version of season 5.
Yeah.
So
wow. Okay.
So Mahatma Randy also gave us feedback on season 2, episode 19 through YouTube. He says, since you asked, seaQuest DSV did a soft reboot between its second and third seasons. The first 2 seasons were set in the far-off future years of 2018 through 2020. The season 2 cliffhanger was resolved via a time jump to 2032, and the title changed to seaQuest 2032 and a significant change in premise. The third season was definitely better and cheaper than the first 2, did not make the mid-season renewal, and canceled after 13 episodes. It's frequently listed by both titles. All right.
I have seen those 2 titles, although if you had asked me before reading this, I would not have been able to tell you that they existed. But I remember seeing them both now.
Yeah. So it sounds, being cheaper than the first 2 is common. I was going to say it sounds almost like Galactica 1980, except he says the third season was definitely better. But yeah, that was Galactica 1980 and the last season of Airwolf were both cases of, let's see if we can keep this going with a drastically reduced budget, especially Airwolf. That was just, that was them saying, if we can get one more season, we could sell this as a syndication package. So they used archive footage of the helicopter and the helicopter that they actually had in a season where they recast everyone but Ernest Borgnine. The helicopter was a cardboard cutout that they weren't allowed to touch because it might fall over.
Well, in the Japanese Spider-Man show, the model for Leopardon was just heavily damaged early in the series production, and so they had to use stock footage of it for the rest of the show. Mm-hmm. But we get, let's see, Scott McFadden. We haven't heard from Scott yet today. Scott McFadden writes an email about 219 Divided Loyalties. He says, hi, guys. Hi, Scott. Welcome back from your hiatus. I have missed listening to the podcast, and I'm glad to have you back again as part of my Saturday routine. I don't know how I'm going to handle it when the day of release changes. Just save us on your podcast until Saturday if you need to, because we'll be coming out on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Divided Loyalties is an episode that I have vivid memories of. Talia turning out to be a traitor was a huge shock. I remember thinking at the time that it was something that no other show would have done. Although I didn't know all of the behind-the-scenes reasons, I assumed that it happened because Andrea Thompson wanted to leave the show. Still, I doubt that any other show on the air at that time would have arranged for her to leave in that way. They might have killed her off, or they might have had her be transferred to another assignment, but to actually have a regular character whom we knew and cared about be a traitor, even if she didn't know it herself, was a gutsy move that I can't see anyone else doing. It surprised Mindy a lot as well. And I remember when we were watching it, in the recent rewatch, that we talked about the relationship between her and Ivanova as well, because although they had hinted at it subtly, I think they had intended to do more of a build with that ended up not getting to happen. So they just kind of like crunched it into that last episode. But yeah, seeing Andrea leave was definitely a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Scott says, in case I'm being too subtle for you, I'm comparing this to another popular outer space franchise that was on at the time.
Yeah, that was one that a contract was a contract, and they didn't like to tinker with that too much. Notable exception being Denise Crosby.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was Crosby who's referring to, but that's a few years ago at this point. or projecting forward to Terry Farrell. I don't know why Terry Farrell left Deep Space Nine.
That I can speak to that. So basically, she felt they weren't going or doing a lot of things with the character. She wanted a little more of an arc. And Berman said, well, you're a terrible actress. You should be lucky to think that you're working at all. We're not going to give you any episodes. So she said, yeah, well, I just got this offer for a sitcom. So if you're going to treat me with that level of disrespect, I don't need to stay. Although she was very upset that she was killed off. She wanted to survive and come back for the series finale. It also irritated a lot of fans. There is a montage in the series finale of footage of the characters over time. And there is no Jadzia Dax. There's only Ezri. So spoilers, but yeah. But yeah, even looking at that when people left during the course of the show, none of them were made traitors. But I think I don't see how you could do that on Star Trek because of their more idealized Starfleet officer in the future.
You could do some sort of Section 31 something or other. They basically did that on Discovery, although they didn't write him off. They just, had him leave for a while.
Yeah. The closest I could think of was not one of the regulars, but there was a recurring character on Deep Space Nine who turns out to be writing the Maquis.
Oh, yeah. Or the season 2 story, yeah.
Yeah. Who then...
Or maybe later than season 2.
Yeah, who then gets largely ignored until all of a sudden Sisko is obsessed with him.
Right. Because that's the storytelling we got. Scott goes on to say, I do kind of agree with your assessment that Andrea Thompson may not have been the strongest actor in the cast, although she did have her moments. Nevertheless, it is a shame that she didn't stick around because it would have been interesting, not to mention quite groundbreaking, to explore the development of a romantic relationship between her and Ivanova. It is well done in this episode, as much of it as we get, and kudos to JMS for including that aspect of her character before she left. But it does feel a bit sudden here rather than being allowed to develop more organically, as was surely the original intention. But it does add a real poignancy to Talia's departure, and the sudden revelation that Talia couldn't be trusted was one more in the series of I can't believe they did that moments that made Babylon 5 feel so special. Well said.
Mm-hmm.
He was on to say, I had exactly the same thought that you did about the scene with Sheridan and Delenn chatting while getting their morning newspapers, how the show accurately predicted having our news specifically tailored to what we're interested in, but not anticipated that getting it as a physical newspaper would be completely outdated. Kind of amusing. But of course, there was also a plot reason to have what is effectively a newsstand, as it provided a place for the two of them to meet and have their mildly flirtatious banter. I love their mildly flirtatious banter. They're so cute. That was me, not Scott. Although Scott might think they're cute too. I don't know. Scott goes on to say, I was intrigued by the bit of Delenn not being able to get the Eye on Minbar feature in her newspaper. I honestly don't remember the details of the plotline enough to know if that's a hint at some kind of censorship in the newspaper or just a cute way to let Sheridan know that she actually is trying to find out what's going on back home, despite her claiming to be satisfied, knowing only what she needs to know. Quite a good episode. Can't wait for the next one. I'm guessing it's the latter.
Yeah, I think at this point it's just about, she claims to be not interested in gossip, but she actually is.
Right. Even when things escalate, I don't remember there being censorship on Minbari stuff, but...
No. And actually, come to think of it now that I'm thinking about that, so when she said she wasn't interested in that, is that a case of a Minbari lying?
We'd have to look at her phrasing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because she could just be downplaying rather than flat out lying.
Yeah.
But hard to say.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you for writing, Scott, as always.
Yes, thank you. And next we have Mahatma Randy's feedback on divided loyalties from YouTube. So, mad shout out to the B5 International Underground of the mid-1990s, a name I just made up. Given the stupidly long breaks between episodes, I was able to negotiate a trade with a fan friend in the UK to tape the final 4 episodes of Season 2, where they aired months before they did in the US, and mail them to me in Atlanta, where I shared them with all my B5 friends, some of whom came in from out of town to watch it.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't stress how fun it was in those days to have something so exclusive months before the rest of the country, or even most of the fandom did. There was a lot of that kind of thing going on back in the day. And I'm going to say right here, kudos to your friend in the UK for getting it to you, because that was in the NTSC versus PAL days. Most of the time we couldn't do that.
Right.
Britain had slightly different aspect ratios and 30 frames per second of interlaced video, or non-interlaced video, whereas we had 24 frames a second of interlaced video in broadcast.
And I did just confirm the broadcast dates. So we have an end of July return versus a mid-October return. So that's almost 3 months ahead of time there. That's a pretty big gap.
So Randy continues, on a personal level, I'm glad to see Talia go. As you mentioned, she seemed to have no life apart from when she was actually on screen. More a va-va-voom Veronica Lake-styled plot device than a character. My personal least favorite example is when she walks into Sheridan's office for no reason other than to say, I just wanted to let you know I think you're settling into your new duties very nicely, and cue plot. An unfortunate intersection of her fairly flat acting, her lack of charisma, and the frequent, I can't do that, it's a violation of Psy-Corps rules, makes her come across as an almost antagonistic character who actively resists doing her job. Probably especially in the second half of the season when she clearly doesn't want to be there, it kind of comes through. I can see that. And I'm wondering how much of her acting was thinking, okay, if you lose control, you're eavesdropping on everyone's thoughts. So maybe she was stiff because she's saying, well, her character would have to live and be stiff with these abilities. I don't know. I haven't seen Andrea Thompson act in other roles. So sometimes that does make a difference. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the X-Files. David Duchovny was fantastic as Mulder, but I find that a lot of his other roles don't really work for me, almost like Chris Reeve as Superman. Chris Reeve is still my favorite Superman to date, but when I checked out his other stuff as a kid with that loyalty to him as the Superman, he never really impressed me.
I'll be curious to see your reactions to David Duchovny on Twin Peaks.
Yep, that's part of the reason I started collecting it. We will get to that when we're through Crusade. Anyway, Randy continues. As far as cast members we've thus far seen on the show, Talia is second from the bottom, ranking only above Warren Keffer.
That's fair.
Yep. My son jokes that Keffer's call sign is Who, since he shows up so rarely, everyone has forgotten who he is by the time he turns up again. If I remember correctly, he's got 6 on-screen appearances, and like 3 of those are 4 minutes or less.
There is a somewhat comedic podcast I listen to, a story podcast called Welcome to Night Vale. And there's this one character named John Peters. And every single time they mention him, they say, the farmer. And I kind of feel like Warren Keffer needs that. Warren Keffer, that hotshot pilot guy who came in for this season, who saw the shadow ship. That's the guy.
Yep. Randy then says, JMS said that WB wanted to cast a new third telepath for the next season, but he fought against that. I'm so glad he did. Lita is so much better in pretty much every way. Yeah, I'm also happy that they brought Lita back. It made it feel a little more coherent and stable, and Pat Tallman did a great job. And especially now knowing part of the reasons that Warner Brothers were resistant to hire her, I think we mentioned it, one of the... Yeah. So I'm happy that they were able to overcome that absolutely unfair obstacle.
Yeah. And I stand by my comments in the episode that as soon as she walks on the screen, she is more intense and interesting to watch than Talia in pretty much every way. Her performance is just so much more engaging.
Yep. All right. JMS says, question for Blaine. When did everyone know that Andrew was leaving the show? I've heard it said it was going into the season. I've heard it said it was halfway through. I'm curious to know because a spider in the web makes no sense in retrospect. The techno-zombie terrorist is trying to kill his own handler. Shouldn't there be some built-in programming to prevent that? So I figure it must have been done before JMS knew she was leaving. Coming into the season, they knew she was unhappy and she was asking to be more involved in the story and have more plot lines. And so the first half of the season, JMS was trying to say, your plot lines are coming. I can't do that for you right now without breaking big parts of the story. It's, and he also didn't want to set a precedent because then it would be problems with everyone because, they'd also budgeted the season saying each character will appear X number of times. And if suddenly everyone who wanted 8 shows up 16, that's a huge difference in payroll, considering there's only 3 of these characters that were supposed to be there every week. So they knew she was unhappy when the season began. The final decision to release her from her contract was more like halfway through. So there was a period of negotiation there. So you could probably have people say, oh, I can see the writing on the wall, because maybe people on set knew we have 2 irreconcilable positions right at the start of season 2. But the actual ink on paper contract stuff was about halfway through. All right. Randy continues. I know John was mostly joking, but you could show lesbian kisses on American TV in the 1990s, though it would cause a lot of controversy. The first one was in LA Law in 1991, which did bring down a firestorm, to be fair. There was some other quirky drama, did one like a year later, I forget the name of the show, but there was much less of a firestorm, possibly just because the show wasn't very popular. Roseanne did it to much higher ratings and less criticism in 1994. Just got a footnote there prompting Barbara Billingsley to say in a Mother's Day episode of Roseanne, hell, I'd even kiss a chick for that much money. So Personal Best got aired on the network Movie of the Week several times in the 80s with minimal censorship, though with a parental warning up front. Point being, it was uncommon, but far from unknown and not against any kind of FCC rules so long as it wasn't done for strictly prurient purposes. If you want to count gay kisses as a joke, it goes back a lot further. The first I can remember was in, looking it up, 1978 on All in the Family, where Archie and Edith were waiting at a bus station and 2 guys are openly making out in the background, which Edith thinks is nice until Archie points out they're a couple of guys. And back in the early run of Cheers, there was an episode culminating in Norm getting a heavy kiss on the lips from a gay guy and commenting, still better than Vera, but Coach, beer.
So I've seen the occasional gay kiss as a joke kind of thing, where a man kisses another man and it's supposed to be taken for a little bit of a humor. I am currently watching All in the Family for the first time. It's one of those shows that spawned a lot of spinoffs, a couple of which I really enjoyed as a kid, and I've been planning to rewatch as an adult, but I wanted to see where they came from. And All in the Family is possibly one of my favorite all-time TV shows now. It is really great. Biting commentary on 1970s politics and human affairs, and it's really pretty great. I have not seen this particular 1978 episode because the show started in 1970 or 71, and that I just finished the first season.
Okay, so still in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Randy continues, I'm sure there's tons of other joke examples I'm forgetting, probably on Cheers and or Barney Miller, who could get away with it for a lot for some reason. Yes, there is more on Cheers. There's even a couple instances on WKRP, although that's a very different tack. So there's one on WKRP where basically a Russian defector wants to have a private conversation with 2 of the characters. So he wants Les Nessman out of the room. So he basically turns around and hits on Les, and Les says, that's another problem they've got, and runs out. But it's the way it's set up is the character's not gay and homophobia is bad. Like one of the things that the show's creators on WKRP did from the start, they wanted to push some limits, and the studio said, or the network said, okay, but you have to show both sides. So they picked these characters are on this side, these characters are on that side, and those characters are wrong about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another one where Johnny gets out of the contract for a condo by pretending he and Venus are lovers that are just going to live in the public hot tub, and then they release him from his contract. And then, of course, Soap was on in that time in a much later time slot, and Billy Crystal was just a flat-out gay regular character. So I don't remember him making out, but no, he was gay, and he was helping his family accept that as ongoing story.
What's interesting and maybe is that I don't remember there being any or many jokey lesbian kisses. You know, guy kissing a guy as a laugh kind of thing. But like, I don't know. Well, I could probably speculate, but there's either not been any or not been nearly as many ways of doing that sort of a joke with women. But anyways.
Yeah. And WKRP actually pushed a lot of boundaries too with transgender politics and acceptance. which is not surprising when we later find out the showrunner for seasons 2 through 4 in that 4-season episode came out as transgender about 30 years after that. And then, the flip side of Night Court, where it's, the butt of the joke, and transgender was jokes specifically about how, oh, look, that makes our lead characters feel icky for a big laugh from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, back to Randy's comments. None of this is intended as a denigration of what B5 did here. This was groundbreaking for an American SF series, and while not 100% groundbreaking for American TV as a whole, it was still damn risky. Probably only the 5th or 6th example on broadcast TV, and hey, good for them. Praise is deserved. I'm just being pedantic because that other show continually claims to have been the first to do things that were in no way first, and in some cases weren't even things they had to fight for, but were things the network was promoting anyway. Social context matters. Here he's probably referring to, there's a huge number of people who say that Kirk and Uhura were the first interracial on-screen kiss. It's the oldest surviving example in color, but there's a good 10 or 12 that came before. Just a lot of those don't survive, so you can't go back and watch them. And that's just, if you count interracial as more than just white and black, you got the entire run of I Love Lucy.
True.
Anyway, Randy continues, and you guys have done a solid job of that, by the way. I like letting us know what other shows were running at the same time and so forth. Right. So thank you, Randy.
Very, very good. Thank you, Randy. Nearing the end of what we're covering on this episode, because we are definitely going to break this stack up into a couple of sections. We do have a message from Mahatma Randy about 220, the long twilight struggle. He says, I felt that the appearance of Drawl, much like the B-plot, where Sheridan got temporarily possessed by an energy being that was trying to get back to the time rift at 8B4, serve only as a sort of, hi, remember me? I still exist kind of thing. They may be necessary, but they always feel intrusive. That having been said, the mention of Zathras definitely made everybody's eyes go wide at the time. Yeah, mine too. And I wanted to make sure that Mindy noticed it and at the same time not be able to tell her a single word of how that could possibly happen. But yeah, Zathras down on the planet. How's that possible? Who knows? We'll find out. We will find out.
Yeah.
Okay, so Randy goes on to say, personally, I don't think that Londo and Shakar's ribbing in season 1 was good-natured. I think it's just as much as they can get away with under the circumstances. I can't stab you, but I can sting you with a nasty insult that proves my verbal superiority while making you feel bad about yourself. They are both very quick-witted. Perhaps good-natured is too strong a word, but not as overtly vicious, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I think in season 1, they were jabbing at each other, not really good-natured, but it's I don't like your entire species and you just happen to be one of them. It's later seasons where it becomes personal.
Right, which at this point we've seen that become the case.
Yeah.
Londo is very much an actor. The Londo we see in private is much different than the official public Londo. Official public Londo is very much playing a role as dictated by his office, his rank, his superiors, and the needs of the moment. Private Londo is him looking at the planet getting bombed, knowing millions of people are dying by the minute, and realizing he is damned beyond all hope of redemption. Public Londo is theatrical and extroverted. Private Londo tends more toward impotent indignation and God's Veer, what have I done? I really like that distinction, and I need to think about that going forward with episodes. Are somebody's eyes on Londo when he is saying or doing whatever he's saying or doing versus not?
Yeah,
because there's a moment in just a recent episode in our releases where he's talking to somebody. Yeah, it's when Lita threatens him with nightmares. And after being a blustering, bombastic tool to her, as soon as she's out of sight and hearing range, he becomes introspective about it. Basically says something about nightmares, like he'd be able to tell with my life the way it's going.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like that distinction. So when you see Londo getting all Hitlerian, that what have I done thing is still inside him. I don't think that makes him sympathetic, nor is it supposed to. He is first and foremost a patriot and would gladly do the whole thing again, though perhaps with a bit less bloodshed. We have seen clearly twice now that he thinks Rifa goes too far, but this is worse than I expected. It's still a long way away from I have remorse for my actions. It was blah, blah, blah is being said by someone 20 or 30 years after the fact. I don't think this is a spoiler. If it is, please feel free to delete the comment.
Yeah. I don't think that's really spoilery. That's why we included it.
Yeah. I think the amount of bloodshed is really the only thing he regrets. Is like the goals are still the goals. The rise to power is still the rise to power.
Yeah, he was not looking for the extinction of the Narns. He was looking to control the Narns. He wanted them to be a workforce under their thumb and a symbol of their power.
And I think he did take some delight in putting down Jakar.
Yeah, he did. But again, like I said, I think he saw the Narns as a symbol of power, saying, look at, the people we have doing things for us on our side. So.
And we had a conversation about that, Mindy and I, whenever that happened, because it is so gross. If you think about it, you have this people who conquered another people. And for the last how many years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, that the Narns have been able to rebel and regain some level of sovereignty and status and identity apart from their having been conquered because they've regained their freedom. And then at the end of it all, Londo and or Rifa and or I forget who else phrases it as they'll never be able to do that to us again. Like the Narns just standing on their own 2 feet after having been conquered was an affront to Centauri. They did that to us. And I feel like that kind of mentality is way too prevalent in people, that because this group that we were so comfortable having in a lesser status, now that they want to stand up and be identified and counted, that is somehow an affront to everyone else. Mm-hmm. And it's gross.
It is, but it is that kind of, victim mentality. This is my superior position we deal with. I mean, I was dealing with a couple of students. One of my students has PTSD. Another one figured a phrase that will set him off. And he has been saying that in front of him at every opportunity for 3 months, despite being told by students and staff to cut it out and stop. Well, the person with PTSD he was bothering finally turned around and insulted him. And then he came after us. It's like, he called me a name. And we're like, yeah. And do you know how many people in the school would have broken your jaw at this point because you've been pushing his buttons for 3 months? It's not right that he called you that name, but you don't have the right to get indignant about him finally retaliating when you've been antagonizing him since the start of the school year.
Right. And the kind of mentality that will resent somebody standing up for themselves in 2025 is the exact same kind of mentality that would have resented it in 1965. And people will claim that they're not that sort of person, but it is the exact same psychology.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Katsoulis gives probably his best ever performance as Jakar in this episode. If not that, then certainly his best performance in this series thus far. The scene of him praying, intercut with the destruction of the Narn fleet, was just stunning. The request for amnesty, him being forced out of the chamber, the fact someone could emote that much with 10 pounds of rubber on their face is staggering. 11 out of 10, no notes. Agreed. Yeah. I don't think it's his best in the series as a whole, only because I've seen so many amazing Jakar moments. But this is head and shoulders above, a level what he's able to do or allowed to do in other episodes.
Yeah, I genuinely don't know how we'd pick a best Jakar moment when he and Katsoulis have a long history of knocking it out of the park every time the camera turns on. Those two are so good. I've said it many times before, given how shaky the ratings were in season 1. If either of those roles had been recast, I genuinely don't know if it would have maintained enough audience to stay on the air for seasons 2 through 5. Those two were sheer gold.
Regarding John's comment about the Great War is coming being a known factor, It's worth noting that the opening narration for the series have all been past tense. I was there at the dawn of the third age of mankind, etc. The show's being framed as a series of events telling a story from episode to episode and season to season, as with any other show, but the series as a whole is being told by characters who survived it all and are giving us their reminiscences. I don't remember the exact point I made that he's referring to. I feel like I was probably discussing a known factor from a viewer perspective. Like, we, watching the opening narration all season, know there's a great war still to come. Not necessarily that the characters in the show itself know that, but I may have said something different that he's referring to here.
Yeah, I think we were talking about it. Might have even just pointed out that, the opening narration says a great war is coming, and now the Centauri Dawn War is resolved. I think even Delenn was talking about the war is coming, so we know they are two different conflicts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it does say the Great War came upon us all by the end of that season. Okay, but it didn't.
Well, it hadn't yet at this point.
But by the end of season 2, we haven't really advanced. I don't know. It's hard to say. No big deal. Muhammad Randi goes on to say, Project Alf was a pilot movie for a potential new Alf TV show had there been enough interest. Oh, okay. So it was not just a one-off film.
Okay.
He says there was not enough interest, so that was that until Alf unexpectedly turned up on the Love Boat: The Next Wave. The 90s were odd. Yes, they were, but sometimes in the best ways.
Yeah.
I'm with John. I like the abrupt and sad ending of Alf the series. Worked really well, though it was intended as a cliffhanger to be resolved at the start of the next season had there been a next season. I did not even know there was intended to be a next season. I thought that was just the end. Okay.
Yeah, as did I. And I like that too. It actually fits with Alf. When you've got neighbors who are constantly watching, and this is the threat you're in for the whole series, right? The concept is one slip up, and the government comes to take them away. So one slip up can happen at any time. So I think an abrupt ending makes sense for that series.
Yeah. And W. Morgan Shepherd is also notable for his role as Blank Reg, a way too old punk rocker with a mohawk and questionable business practices who frequently interacted with the stars. That was the first time I saw him way back in the TV movie / pilot in like 1984 or so. It's probably Blank Reg. That's okay. John spoke of the relatively flat scene of Londo watching from his ship as Narn is bombed. Blaine can probably speak about this better than I can, but it's my impression that this show actually aided in the development of seamless integration of CG and practical effects more than pretty much anything else that was on TV at the time. All I can say is that at the time watching on TV, it was breathtaking. I think one of the most remarkable elements of it, which I suspect was accidental, was the reverse shot where we see Londo looking at the bombing from behind, where we can see his stunned expression reflected on the window in front of him. I don't think I was intending to criticize the shot so much as just to mention that it was noticeable. But yes, the show has done so much. Even just across the 5 years of the show, the digital effects jump leaps and bounds. When you watch the space scenes in The Gathering versus the space scenes at the end of season 4, you would think you had jumped a generation of digital effects.
Yeah, for as much as they look dated, you can see the progression that they were partly driving. The fact that they were doing this with Amigas, with the Video Toaster add-on. But when other people were buying Craze and these guys were buying Amigas, that was, for those who don't remember, because the Amiga was kind of short-lived, it was just a home PC, right? It was like buying a bunch of Dells or Macs. They were producing a major TV show with them.
Right. A lot of but just to reinforce though, the over the shoulder reflective shot, yes, that is stunning in its believability. He says a lot of the stuff looks cheap now. A lot of it did look cheap then, such as most of Down Below being composed of milk crates and printer paper lit from behind. I don't know. A lot of it was just astounding at the time. No TV show prior to this, however, even attempted such a wide palette of designs and colors and environments and textures and set extensions and things. Hell, very few movies had even attempted such a thing. Here. Full agreement.
Yep. All right. So our last piece of feedback to be shared in this episode, but as we said, there's going to be another one. Stuart Wald 2395 on YouTube says about the long Twilight struggle. John and Blaine covered the stuff packed into this episode. I can only add that the long twilight struggle comes from JFK's famous 1961 inaugural address. The battle against communist tyranny will take years, and the actions and outcomes of individual contests will often be shrouded and not clearly understood at the time, or maybe ever, but the fight must be waged nonetheless. All right. So thanks everyone for that, and for the ones we still have coming up. We've got. Actually, you know what? Let's do one more so we have a clean break after the last piece of input on the long twilight struggle.
Okay. I was just rereading his words on that because that really is, Stuart, a great description of how this storyline has gone. So yeah, it does help to illustrate how that title is very apt for this. So thank you for that. Okay, so one more. Scott McFadden, writing about Long Twilight Struggles, says, "Hi guys." Hi, Scott. "Well, this was an episode, wasn't it? It's hard to know what to say about it. It's a gut punch of an episode, another one that completely changes the status quo of the series. It's hard to watch, particularly the scenes in the council chamber, even though it features some great acting from both Jurisic and Katsoulis. The fact that great acting is the very reason that it's so hard to watch." Agreed. John made some good points about Londo in his commentary, which I had never really considered before. Thank you, Scott. Specifically the way that while the Centauri are using Londo and his status has risen as a result, they obviously don't really respect him. He doesn't approve of the plan they are preparing to put into operation, and he doesn't approve of the use of mass drivers. But that means nothing to Rifa nor to anyone else. He's not valued for his counsel or his knowledge, but only for his access to the shadows. That's an interesting additional layer to someone who is otherwise becoming one of the villains of the series. We can feel Londo's frustration while still being repulsed by what he does. Katsoulis is just as good, both in his big speech of defiance after being expelled from the council and in the smaller moments like his desperation to stop the Narn attack on Gorash before it's too late, his prayers while the slaughter is going on, and his quiet dignity as he asks Sheridan for sanctuary. It's a wonderful performance. He is a pillar of strength in that episode who does not want to ask for help, but has to in order to continue being a pillar. He can't stand on his own, and it's really well done. John Shook was a nice surprise. Even though I've seen all these episodes before, I'd forgotten that he was on the show. I have a strange relationship with John Shook as a performer. While he has a long career, which includes many dramatic roles, his Star Trek appearances, a recurring role on Law & Order Special Victims Unit, and even musical theater on Broadway, somehow I always think of him first as Yo-Yo the Android Policeman on the absolutely terrible 1970s sitcom Holmes and Yo-Yo, which I watched faithfully. I'm sure that's not what he would like to be remembered for, but that's the way my mind works. Sorry about that, Mr. Shuck. Okay, that is pretty great. I'm just looking him up real quick as okay, I've got his face there. John Shuck Yo-Yo. Yep, that's pretty terrible, but okay. I'll have to see if there's an episode of this out there on the YouTubes or something. That's pretty great. He says the one thing that I would have expected to see in this episode, which we don't see, is the actual damage being done to the Narn homeworld. We see the Centauri attack from Londo's perspective, but we don't see what's happening on the ground. No buildings crumbling, no cities in flames, nothing like that. Not that it makes you see a bunch of carnage, but we might have expected to be shown something of what these mass drivers can do. I was about to say what he says in the next sentence. I suspect this is largely due to budgetary reasons. Having spent all the money on the space battle against the Shadows, which was excellent, I'm sure they didn't have much left of the FX budget for showing us the war-torn surface of Narn. Not a huge omission, but something that I noticed. Yeah, I think there's only so much you can do. You can put all your money into showing a few things well, or try to spread your money out and show some things less well. I think it's one of those things like I'm watching Sliders from the 90s, which involves every episode. There's a beginning and ending where they come in or an exit through a portal. And sometimes, a lot of times, the entrance from the portal is done off screen just to save that money for other things. So yeah. But Scott does say we're getting toward the end of the season. It's ramping up to be a doozy. Talk to you guys later. Scott. Thank you very much, Scott.
I think doozy is an appropriate discussion of what's coming up.
Yes, there's definitely going to be some doozying. As opposed to the dozing whenever Sheridan was having dinner with Dylan and Lanier.
Yes. Okay. So when we come back, there's a little bit more of Long Twilight Struggle, but it's in the same episode or the same piece of feedback as later episodes. So we'll save that one. We do have a lot of feedback. And as we said, we're going to schedule another feedback episode during this broadcast break to cover the rest. So thanks for those who've written in. Please feel free to email more at babylon530yearslater@gmail.com using either numerals or words for those numbers. We've captured all the email addresses.
You can also leave comments on the websites. My website is johnreadscomics.com. You'll notice that the vast majority of our the vast majority of our feedback comes through email and YouTube. So that is fine. But you are also welcome to leave comments on the websites if that's your venue of choice. johnreadscomics.com. You can leave a comment on this or any other episode.
Yep. You can also leave feedback on bureau42.com, which to date is the only venue in which we have not received feedback of these four possible options.
There is also the option of leaving a review on the podcatcher of your choice. We have received ratings on Apple Podcasts. Thank you very much for all those who have rated us. We have yet to receive a review. So if you leave one, we will read it and thank you for it.
All right. And as John said earlier, YouTube is also a viable option, and it's one of the more popular ones. So yes, you can also leave feedback on our YouTube channel, where the episodes are automatically cross-posted.
Which I'm always, kind of fascinated by, because whenever we did make ours Marvel on YouTube, no one seemed to engage with it there. But people seem to very much engage with the YouTube for this show. So I don't know what the difference is between those two. But
yeah, I have no idea. There are people who have built entire careers and try to figure out how things work and how people make decisions on social media, and it's still right. The experts still don't get how some of it works, because some of it just doesn't seem to follow any discernible logic.
I guess people are strange when you're a stranger.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we appreciate the feedback, and if that's the way that works for you, great. Thank you for just listening and participating in the conversation.
So our next episode is going to be book 3, right?
Yes, Blood Oath.
Which I have reread recently because, like I said earlier, it came out during October, during the first few episodes of this block. And we'll be talking about that soon. And during this break, do we have anything else scheduled besides another feedback episode? Because it's only 2 months before we come back with episodes.
Yeah, I think we're just going to have that Blood Oath and 2 pieces of feedback.
All righty. Well, do come back for our novel discussion in a couple of weeks, and then we'll have more of your feedback after that. And of course, new episodes resume at the end of January 2026. So as those come out, and until then, as always, thank you very much for listening.
And good eating to you.